So it's that oven-ready stupidity that is haunting Boris Johnson, and it will haunt Boris Johnson for the rest of his period and time in the post in number 10 Downing Street. And the coverage of the exchanges yesterday in the House of Commons, in today's newspapers, and in our diagnosis, focusing on the few minutes of Ed Miliband. What it sums up is that Boris Johnson has always been a pretender, and yet the mainstream media, Fleet Street in particular, has given him completely unjustified and falsified image, enhanced to the point of kind of similarity between him and the image constructed in the past, let's say 50, 60 years of Winston Churchill. The image constructed of Winston Churchill after the 1945 kind of events, ending the so-called Second World War. Now, as many people are openly now admitting, Boris Johnson was never fit for this office or any of the offices that he has been allowed to hold, especially the office of mayor at the expense of London. It's not mayor of London. It's the mayor at the expense of London. And for that, the blame lies squarely with Tony Blair. He foisted that idea on the people of the democratic people of the various boroughs and of Greater London. And despite the efforts by the totally misguided and ignorant kind of cabals of the Labour Party in various places, the executive elected mayor thing remains totally unwelcome and unwanted. And we shall be watching what happens in Croydon. Croydon Council has been a cesspit of corruption and criminality, and crooks have been in control of Croydon Council for too long. And the fact that Corbyn never happened to understand that is not incidental. It's not a side issue. It's one of the intellectual deficiencies that I have pointed out in Corbyn. It is intellectual inability. Even before you get to the ethical kind of unacceptability and illegitimacy and immorality, look at the intellectual ability. He doesn't even understand. He has not shown, Corbyn has not shown any understanding of the basic, objectively defined basic duties owed to the local public by the local council. And the repetition of the plea by various lobbies and agents and propagandists for the Labour-controlled councils that they are being starved of finance by the Tory central government. That is only one side of the fact and one side of the truth. The full truth is that that is true, but also the amount of money and the resources that these councils do have, the amount is being misused in significant ways. And the local community is being lumbered with problems that it should not have to have been lumbered with. If the councils did not misuse the money or steal the money or allow crooks inside the councils to steal the money and the resources. So that's the norm. That is the pattern all across England and English borough councils. There are crooks and gangs of criminals operating. So Michael Gillard is absolutely wrong to say that Newham Council was the only one which had entrenched criminal gangs operating inside it and secret societies inside the Newham Council, fronted by Robin Wales for 16 years. Gillard is absolutely wrong on that one. That shows the Gillard, despite the plug and the hype, is not as serious an investigative reporter or journalist as he should be and he could have been. Now, he didn't have anything in his book, or he doesn't have anything in his book, which he plugged by plugging Roxana Fiaz after she got in. He didn't and hasn't made a single point about the lack of accountability by Newham Council and by extrapolation, principled democratic extrapolation, the lack of accountability by other councils, both in the immediate neighborhoods and also beyond and across all of England, all of London. And the Gillard failure is not an accident. As I said before, not today, but in the previous statements and posts and broadcasts, the Distillers Company was investigated by the Sunday Times. And the Distillers Company's crime of the thalidomide kind of drug was exposed by the investigation. And Harold Evans made most of his kind of reputation based on that investigation. It was never repeated, and Harold Evans kind of degenerated into a sucker of the powers that be. But Harold Evans's investigation was an isolated incident in the life of Fleet Street. It should have been the norm, but it wasn't the norm. And all these decades later, there has been no similar investigation comparable to the Sunday Times' investigation of the Distillers Company and the drug thalidomide and its effect, disabling, debilitating effect on the victims. And that is what I am diagnosing, I'm finding in the diagnosis. This is a sickness on the part of the entirety of Fleet Street. It's not investigative, and it is not probing the truth. And therefore, the truth is never kind of unearthed, and thus the deniers of the truth, the deniers of the services, deniers of the obligations, for example, the deniers operating as councils and through councils in London, in England, and across the whole country where the borough council system operates, similar to England and London, the people who are the voters, the so-called voters, the electors, are being let down. And the people have been, I have called them gullibles. Most of the people who don't put up a fight against the violations of their rights are gullibles. What else are they? The gullibles taking the propaganda pill given to them by the various organs of propaganda. So despite the technology change and the technologically kind of so-called shift from the print to the online and the internet and the computer and all the rest of it, the essential kind of disparity between peoples persists. And I'm saying this because whatever impact the dissenting voices echoed and expressed by 5 former prime ministers against Boris Johnson's law-breaking thuggery, the impact hasn't reached most people. The impact hasn't reached the members of parliament who voted, by more than 60 votes, I think, the action through to the next stage. And that is what I am saying about the impact and the lesson of the speech by Ed Miliband. I'll tell you why. It is like a litigant, for example, this person called Edmonds, who took the Tower Hamlets Council to a tribunal and lost. He lost, but the proceedings revealed such a big amount of evidence about the corruption in Tower Hamlets Council that more than made up for the loss that he suffered personally, let's say, in losing the particular case. So litigation of that type must not be seen as dependent on or as defined by or as measurable by the outcome, say he lost or he won. He actually won because of the years that he spent in collecting the evidence and explaining the evidence to his team and whoever was involved with him in the presentation of the evidence to the tribunals and whoever else was adjudicating. The evidence is absolutely unique in the case of this Edmonds case, because no other case, no other litigation concerning the corruption of Tower Hamlets Council has revealed as much evidence about the systematic corruption and criminality by the elected officials in post in Tower Hamlets Council and their appointed and overpaid criminal gangsters posted as, quote, council officers. Now, what does this mean? It means that people like Edmonds should be able to pursue their claims against the council on a forum that is not confined to and obstructed by the corruption of the tribunal system itself. The tribunal system is not an objectively neutral and fair and unbiased outfit. It's an operation to suppress the evidence, suppress the truth. So anyone who loses a vote in the House of Commons, for example, should be able to have another go because of the quality and the strength and the urgency and the importance of the cause that they lost on. And that cause and the importance affects the wider rights and needs of society and people. So to limit people's representation, so-called, to the kind of parliamentary democracy that we have at the moment is obsolete, it's passé. It's like 300 years ago. What is needed is to have forums, not just one forum, more than one forum, whereby the whole argument, the whole evidence can be presented and can be argued for extensively without any restrictions, and until the truth is upheld and the wrongdoers are ousted by being discredited, exhaustively discredited. So I'm arguing here that when the Richard Morey ruling said that Luthroman had got in by corrupt means, fraudulent means and so on, and yet the police repeatedly, the Metropolitan Police repeatedly decided not to prosecute him, and the Crown Prosecution Service, which is the bureaucratic kind of mechanism that is used or abused to prosecute or not to prosecute whoever, that kind of vehicle is restrictive and restricted and has restricted the operation of the demands that justice demands, let's say. And that is a void, that is an emptiness, that's a big hole in the whole system. So it's not a democratic system, it is not an inadequate system of constitutional rights and constitutional kind of monarchy, regime, or reign, or atmosphere, or environment. It is full of big holes and gaps that can be filled. And I'm suggesting this is the world exclusive diagnostic broadcast. So I'm suggesting here, world exclusive suggestion, that there must be other kind of agencies and forums and platforms created in order to make up for the shortfall and failures of the existing bureaucratic judicial obstruction and the bureaucratic parliamentary obstruction. So, for example, yesterday, when the Boris Johnson law-breaking thuggery bill got through, it should not have been allowed to be treated as the final thing, final decision, in the procedural sense. It should be treated as one of the things that can be done in Parliament, but that is not the end of it. The demands for opposing and stopping the Johnson bill should be possible to be advanced by a democratic forum elsewhere outside the limits of the corruption Parliament. If you look at the way that the Deputy Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, Eleanor Lang, I think her name is, Eleanor Lang, who is whose record is not very bright and not very decent in terms of democracy. She interrupted to say to Ed Miliband that he shouldn't be asking the Prime Minister to stand up and answer, or words to that effect. She did that because she knew that she could put a stop to Ed Miliband's line by saying that from the chair or the deputy chair's chair or spot. Now, that's fine. Let her do that. But these people are condemning democracy by interrupting a very spontaneous flow of argument and demand that was doing a very good job of exposing a wrongdoer. And Ed Miliband did say that it was the difference between right and wrong. And that is exactly what is at stake at every stage. And I'll come to discuss the Financial Times today on page 12, where the kind of banner is financials, that is outfits that are to do with finance and financial bureaucracy. And it says, Ombudsman Service puts up defense of disputes handling. Now, I shall have this edition significantly devoted to a denunciation of the crookedness that is the English or British ombudsman system, which is a completely corrupt system. And I include in that the Information Commissioner and the other similar kind of thing like local government ombudsman and the Financial Conduct Authority and all the other corrupt outfits that are part and parcel of the crooks that are big business robbers and looters and thieves, big business thieves and crooks and looters, not just the ordinary thieves that are stealing hundreds of pounds or hundreds of thousands of pounds, the multi-billion pound thieves that are robbing the public and robbing society by abusing, by putting to use these so-called ombudsmen. They're all serving the interests against society, against justice, against accountability. So I'll come to that in a very short while. So what is happening here is that, for example, in the local government ombudsman, the council in Tower Hamlet, let's say, the council was corrupt, is corrupt, and continues to be corrupt. And John Biggs, who succeeded, I'm talking about chronology. I'm not talking about the achievement that is implied in the word success. The chronological successor or follower of Lutheraman, who was ousted by Richard Morey on the 23rd of April 2015. Now, Biggs told me outside the Royal Courts of Justice on a little kind of interview I did after the verdict was announced, that he was looking forward to making things better and the corruption go away and all the words to that effect. I have interviewed, or I have attempted to interview Biggs quite a few times. despite the fact that I know he's a liar, I know he's a racist, and I know he is very limited and he's very ignorant. But that is the opinion based on the evidence. That doesn't mean that I don't give him the opportunity to perhaps make me change my view of him by saying something honest and starting to behave against corruption and crooks. But he hasn't done that so far. Now, on the 22nd of June 2013, I recorded an interview with him, with John Biggs, and it is online. It has been online. And that is a piece of my interview with Biggs that is representative of his personality dysfunction. Biggs is a crafty, practiced liar. And Biggs is a practiced vain person. I'll give an example from that particular video. He says in that particular interview, when I asked him about the attack by the big business and City of London on the east end of London, on Brick Lane, on Whitechapel, etc. That was dated the 22nd of June 2013, so 7 years ago. He doesn't answer straightforward. He doesn't give me a straightforward answer. He says, he had bought a book 30 years ago about the kind of agenda of the City of London on the east end of London. It's like a third person praising somebody else. He obviously based it on the assumption that if he says that he read a book or he bought a book, then it would impress himself or his image on me. Like, oh my God, he's a well-read, or he's a read person, he's a knowledgeable person. But that was irrelevant. That was redundant, because I had known him to be an empty and corrupt and racist, ignorant individual. So that was nothing to do with him impressing me at all. Now, even though there was a book he could have bought 30 years ago, I know what the book was, and that book I had kind of dismissed as it was being promoted at the time. And the authors were Charlie Foreman and somebody else. And I had denounced that book as stupid, ignorant, ill-informed, and racist about Spitalfields. And they had published that book from the Spitalfield, what they call SHARP, S-H-A-R-P, Spitalfields Housing Rights Service or something. It was not serving the housing needs of the community at all, despite the fact that it was called that. Now, Charlie Foreman is now employed in the Hackney Council, and I've given him opportunities in the subsequent years to come and talk to me about what he is doing and what he's thinking about housing is. He has so far declined to acknowledge receipt of my invitations. The fact that I have invited him does not, even the slightest, mean that I have got any confidence in him or his ability. But I want to give him the opportunity to put on the record what he says he's doing. So people like Charlie Foreman, employed by Hackney Council or in Hackney, are unwarranted, are in positions that are not kind of justified. The money that they're getting, either directly as employees of the council or as consultants or whatever, they are wasting the money and they're abusing the money because they're not contributing the truth to the community. If they had been doing that, then there would be no housing crisis in areas like Tower Hamlets. Because Charlie Foreman is one of the people who was imposed with some other people I could name, but I'm not naming them because they are too kind of, in terms of contribution, they're too insignificant. These people made careers, and they are now, some of them have got, well, most of them have got private kind of properties where they're living, either in London or in the suburbs or in some out of London places. They've done well for themselves, but they have not helped the community get the housing rights that it needs and it has needed. So for the last 30 years or 40 years, whatever, people in Tower Hamlets, successions of people in Tower Hamlets, in housing need, people meaning individuals, people meaning families, people meaning groups, otherwise made into groups for whatever reasons, have been denied housing rights in Tower Hamlets. And almost all those years, John Biggs has been occupying a very well-paid position as a kind of elected something, either a councillor or elected to the GLA from the City of London and Tower Hamlets and Newham. But Biggs has not produced, in all that time, Biggs has not produced one single statement. One single statement. Forget about the policies, forget about the kind of achievements. One single statement that is original, that is truthful, that is against the big business takeover of the area. That is not something that he has done. So to tell me, as he did on the 22nd of June 2013, that he had bought a book 30 years ago is grotesquely offensive, because I knew better than those quote so-called authors, and I had known for years better than them altogether. And he telling me, he's telling me that he had bought a book is so stupidly pompous that it cannot be substantiated as a subject of analysis at length. So he said that. Now, I said that he's a personality, he's a style, he's a dishonest style. So he says that as if he's talking about a third person. Wind back this video if you want to see what I said before. And I talked about his personality problem in terms of kind of representing himself as if he's talking about some other party. So he comes across as a third party objective kind of referee or commenter or observer. So when he appeared, or when he gave evidence, or when he was quoted by Mori as giving evidence about Lutfur Rahman, he referred to himself as other people have said about me, this and that and the other. He doesn't say, I'm not a racist. He doesn't say, I am not a liar. He doesn't say that I'm not an opportunist. He doesn't say that I'm an exploiter of the local community. I have not contributed anything to the local community. So John Biggs is exploiting the current composition of the council and the current so-called unconstitutional, illegal constitution of the council, because all the councillors, including Peter Golds, the Conservative, are either kind of resigned to the fact that they can't do anything to change it, or they've got little benefits that they want to protect. And the result is that there is no accountability by Biggs on anything, because Biggs is the personification of the council. That is the point I'm making, because he is the mayor. And he is the personification of the council because the mayor system is so overwhelmingly concentrated in one person that unless the elected councillors that also coexist at the same time as the elected mayor, unless the elected councillors decide to break the silence and start asking questions, there is no way that this system can be broken. And so therefore the people are trapped, and people are trapped in a borough with a council that is completely irresponsive and irresponsible. And that is the crisis that needs sorting. And that is the crisis that Jeremy Corbyn denied had existed. My video of 2016 of 2 minutes, maybe just over a minute or few seconds, I think, of Corbyn speaking in Watney Market, while Biggs on the one side and former councillor Shiria Khatun stood on his left, and on his right was Unmesh Desai, who succeeded Beeks at the GLA as the so-called representative for City of London, Tower Hamlets and Newark, stood. And Corbyn gave a most pathetic and uninspiring kind of plea statement about the poverty created by the DWP and all that. And he was surrounded by people who were, in fact, implementing or supporting the implementation of the culture and the agenda of keeping people poor in the East End. So, where do people go then? People who want justice and who want an end to this. And they go to the ombudsman, the local government ombudsman. And whoever it is, the local government ombudsman, it is a disgrace. It is a disgrace as defined ordinarily. Disgrace as defined ordinarily. Everybody, so let's say in Tower Hamlets there are 200,000 or nearly 300,000 people or 250,000 people, whatever the number of the people in Tower Hamlets, every single day, whether it's a weekend, whether it's a weekday, people have experienced of encounters and contacts with the council or with an agency or a person representing the council or being hired by the council, or are there in contact with or they're experiencing a problem caused by the council. So it's an everyday occurrence. It's an everyday experience. Contacting the local council for most people in a borough like Tower Hamlets is an everyday experience, most ordinary people. And there is no redress. Most of the experience is bad. Most of the experience is negative. Most of the experience is unsatisfactory, unfair, unjust, and not meeting the needs of the moment. So where do people go? It is said that people can go to the ombudsman. But anyone who believes that can also be accused of believing that they are living on a completely fantasy land. It is impossible. You cannot find the ombudsman doing anything. If you start complaining to the ombudsman, you would need somebody else, and you need full-time attention and dedication of somebody who is equipped intellectually and with the necessary knowledge of the law and other skills to be able to do that. And that means that that person has to be resourced. And there is no resource for anyone, even if they existed theoretically, take on that kind of task, because it takes days, weeks, months, even years to get any redress via the ombudsman against the council. So it's an impossible situation. So multiply that by the number of people and then add the whole population, and you will see it's not the 8 or 9 million people that I talk about who are in poverty and low income and in unfulfilling situations, environments in this country. It would be more than that. It would be about half of the population that need redress and an actual delivery, actual practically active mechanism of accountability and transparency and answerability for their needs against the local council. Because the local council is the agency for welfare, for transport, and a lot of health and a lot of policing and a lot of social kind of related work. And of course, safeguarding the children, which is the thing that was kind of exposed when we talked about the safeguarding children agenda, being the money being robbed from that one by the gang of criminals that were in control of the youth service, so-called Inter-Hrs Council, as covered by the subsequent coverage in the Private Eye, which was one of the applicants for access to the documents that John Biggs was hiding despite the demands from the claimant, Edmonds, Mark Edmonds, whatever the first name is. Edmonds is the name that can be checked and can be accurately checked. So what happened was that Lutfur Rahman's legacy that is left over, the whole kind of piles and piles of problems that Lutfur Rahman left behind in the corrupt youth service was being shielded from scrutiny by Biggs. How many people know that? How many people can even understand that? Because Biggs was the direct beneficiary of the kind of end of Lutfur Rahman's career. And people automatically sympathized with Biggs because they said that he had been unfairly deprived previously by not only Lutfur but also by the Labour Party's official candidate, who was the previous leader of the Labour group and the leader of the Inter-Hrs Council, Abbasuddin Elias Helal. So Lutfur left behind not only a record of disgraceful kind of discrediting the community into disrepute and all that, bringing the community into disrepute, bringing the post into disrepute, bringing himself and the associated population by implication into disrepute, but also he was followed by somebody who kept a lead on most of his misconduct and wrongdoing while in post. Think about that. And the campaigners like this guy called N.D. Alam and the woman that was with him, Angela Moffat, a UKIP supporter apparently, and this person called Ajmal Hussain, who has been given undue credit for being the champion against corruption. These people have not done anything. And I say that because this is now 5 years since Lutfur was ousted. And 5 years since Ajmal Hussain boasted at the so-called press conference held in a pub off the Fleet Street or of the kind of Strand, near the Strand, that from this day onward there is no corruption in Tower Hamlets. He said there was no corruption in Tower Hamlets from that day onwards. How stupid can that be? Ajmal Hussain has shown no ability to understand corruption, let alone claim to be an expert on declaring the end of corruption from that day onwards. In fact, Tower Hamlets has been as corrupt since Lutfur was ousted as it had been before he was ousted, and as it had been before he was even any name at all as an entity in the local council, or as it had been long before he even came to this country. So, the idea that corruption ended with Richard Morey throwing Lutfur Rahman out of the post was contaminated by the fact that Ken Livingstone and others of his ilk continue to this day, 5 years on, continue to say that Lutfur Rahman was not corrupt and that he was a victim of whatever they may say he was a victim of. He was not a victim of anything, but his own behavior and his role. So where do people go? Where do people who want justice and who want an end to corruption go? They can't go to the ombudsman because, as I said, the ombudsman like is there to destroy any complainant, the time and the energy and the best part of anyone's life. That is how bad the ombudsman system is. That is how corrupt it is. So that's local government ombudsman, and it's lumbered with other kind of responsibilities, other kind of subsidiary things, which completes the darkness of the dark age. There is no transparency, there is no accountability, there is no ethical kind of redress by the people aggrieved by the corruption and criminality of local councils, or concerned about the failure of the council, or let alone that, I mean, in addition to that, people who are victimized directly by the local council's corruption and criminality. Now, anyone who has been watching this will know that I have been referring to Newham Council and Hrs Council, and I have been promising that I'll be kind of delving deeply into the behavior and the record of Newham Council and Hrs Council. Now, this introduction, updated introduction, contextual introduction, should be included as part of the evidence that I am broadcasting as part of the world exclusive diagnostic report under the banner of the diagnosis of Fleet Street. And I'm talking about Fleet Street. Financial Times today are talking about the ombudsman system in the financial sector, but that is extrapolated easily to cover the local government ombudsman's behavior, and also the information commissioner and other kind of comparable kind of outfits. These are all in existence in order to deny the very thing that they are promoted to be in existence for. Now, the two reports that I have seen, I have not seen the report published by local government ombudsman about Newham Council this year, but I have seen the one last year, and I've seen the one published in the year before. Now, the year before mainly covered the complaints that the ombudsman received against Newham Council while Robin Wales was still incumbent. And so, but the important point here is that that report was almost literally repeated in the report by the ombudsman, the same ombudsman, the year later, 2019, when it was 1 year after Ruxana Fiaz, quote, replaced Robin Wales as the incumbent mayor. But it's absolutely identical. The lies that Newham Council chief executive, the monitoring officer, and whoever wrote to the ombudsman in response to the ombudsman's request for evidence were identical, absolutely identical. And that is the worst point that the ombudsman could made against Newham Council, could have made, and he did make that. But so what? It wasn't followed by any prosecution of the liars. So there is no avenue, even when the post holder and the regime in a so-called institution of this country is exposed as having lied repeatedly. Then it is not followed by the CPS prosecuting them. And it cannot be expected that the CPS will ever prosecute a local council, because let's say just the administrative, just the logistics of it, the bulk of the burden and the weight of it. If it were the case that it was possible for a council administration to be prosecuted for lying, then that would be the main task of the prosecuting authorities, and the courts would be log-jammed into looking at the evidence of the criminality of all these absolutely hundreds of criminals operating from and through local councils. That is how bad it is. That is how totally swept under the flood of criminality and corruption local councils are. I only talk about Tower Hamlets and Newham because I have got more resources in terms of the evidence about those two councils due to direct encounters. And I have contacts and experiences and communications of experiences with other councils, especially, for example, like Westminster Council, Lambeth Council, Southwark Council, and Lewisham Council, Greenwich Council, and other councils in the inner London setup. And I can say from all those contacts and observations and evidence and inquiries that I have conducted and initiated, there is absolutely no accountability in any of the councils. So, where do people go? People cannot go anywhere. So they resign to putting up with this kind of corruption, bad service, no service, poor service, denial of service, and worse, sometimes the campaigners are targeted by the corrupt councils. And the campaigners then give up because they can't put up with the pressure that the crooks cabals mount against them. So what I'm saying here, therefore, is that this country is in a constitutional crisis big time because of the thuggish behavior of the Boris Johnson fronted cabal of lawbreakers. And previously, in the recent past, that is in the last few weeks, the thuggish behavior against the migrants and so on. So the people are being fed this one-sided news by the likes of the Fleet Street outlets and their counterparts published from regional cities and centers. But people are not being given the information about what option as human beings, as emotional beings, as psychological units, as persons who need balance and equilibrium in their outlook and their attitude, and some kind of peace in their world, in their lives. Where do they go when they're being so distraught, where they're being denied and defied like this? Where do they go? There is nothing in the papers about the councils. It's one-sided coverage and hype by the Fleet Street and also their equivalents online. So I'm saying the other side of it. I'm saying that this country is not just in crisis about the parliament being in that state, put in that state by Corbyn colluding and being complicit with Boris Johnson and handing over the election of the 12th of December 2019, because I hold Corbyn absolutely responsible for that. And so there is no sign that Keir Starmer is going to change anything. The maximum that can be expected from Keir Starmer is that he will get in and he'll slot himself into the power if a number of combinations of accidents kind of befall the Boris fronted kind of regime. Then he will get into the number 10, but he won't change anything for the better. That's Keir Starmer. I'm saying it, and I've been consistently saying this because Starmer is a limited person. He's not a Democrat. He's not a campaigner. And he is, in fact, quite happy to do the same thing as the Tories are doing. So the difference will be in the personality. So therefore, there is no sign of any social or democratic kind of upheaval in this country. And if there is not, then this country is sinking even deeper. It's going down and down and down. And what I mean by that is that most people who are deprived of their rights and their opportunities and the life chances are going to lose out even more as ever. So in order, anyone who wants that to stop, I want that to stop. I've been wanting that to stop forever. I mean, I've been inspired by the predominance of the corruption and lies to be forever active. That is the whole point. But if anyone else agrees with me, and if they want to change the status quo from being, sinking the country into the darkness, then the way is not to write to the MP or to write to the ombudsman or to the council. They can do that if they have the time and the energy. But that will not change what they want changed and what needs to be changed on the evidence. what they can do and what is needed in this country, locally, regionally, centrally, is for alternative institutions and avenues to be created by the people, by democratic activists, by transparency activists, by ethical activists, and the kind of revenue should not be the main issue at all. Of course, revenue will be there necessary, and you can fund anything with minimum kind of effort if you are united with a goal to raise funds just to cover the costs and the necessary kind of administration and all that. That is the basic requirement. If you are kind of wanting to change the system and create an alternative system that covers all the areas, then the aim should not be to make a career. That would be self-defeating. So, but if it is a moral, ethical, democratic, and accountable objective to achieve fairness and just remedies and access, then it can be done. And I have been doing this on individual basis. I've been taking on councils whatever on behalf of people, and I've been delivering whatever I have been delivering. And I can say that it is possible to confront the wrongdoing, offending person or personnel. And it can be done with consistent evidential pursuit. So how do we go about it? First of all, there has to be an agreement. There has to be enough people across this country who can bring the evidence of their encounters and experiences with local council crooks on board and publish this, share this. First of all, there has to be a revolution of awareness, of evidence, not hearsay, not fabricated accounts, but actual evidence. And that is the beginning. And we shall be talking in the next editions more about this. This is coming to an end at 1 minute past midday in the afternoon, just afternoon, Greenwich Mean Time, on the Tuesday, 15th of September 2020. We shall be continuing in the next editions about the Ombudsman, about the alternative network. And what I mean by the Ombudsman and the alternative networks is that we have to have an alternative to the parliament, alternative to the courts of denial, not courts of justice, alternative to the departments, central government departments, alternative to the local councils, and alternative to the local councillors. These may sound formidable structures, but they are not formidable because people are already doing the majority of the work that these will require, but they're not doing it in a systematic, united way. And the ultimate objective is to serve the people's needs, but also to reduce significantly and definitively reduce poverty in a way that people don't suffer indignity and loss of most amenities of life in the way that they are caused without any remedy at the present time and have been caused since 1945, despite the slogans about our NHS and the welfare state and all the rest. It has never been welfare state at all. It has been the penalizing, punishing of people who have been in need of the income, because the need has been created by the failing system and the failing society and the failing kind of capitalism and the failing politicians and political system. So it is enough evidence there, out there, and we have harnessed this and synthesized this, and like Ed Miliband did that in the 2 minutes or whatever on Monday the 14th of September, we can then put the questions to the offenders and see them squirm in collective forms and in other forms. So until the next edition, this is now 3 minutes past midday on Tuesday, the 15th of September 2020.